is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
The Atari version and the Commodore 64 version were completely different. Even though we said, these are the commands we want, this is what we need, Steve and Dan decided that they wanted to take the product in a different direction because the Atari could do a little bit more. It actually came out to be a really, really nice product.
Hi, I'm Kevin Savitz, and this is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. Lloyd Speyer worked for Batteries Included from 1983 to 1987, where he worked with Commodore PETs and 64s, Apple IIs, Macintosh, as well as the Atari 800. He built hardware dongles, demonstrated products in the retail store, and worked in quality assurance, where he beta tested PaperClip and HomePak. This interview was conducted April 27, 2015.
Okay, I understand you worked at Batteries Included from 1983 to 1987.
That's correct.
And you worked on PET and 64 and Mac and some Atari stuff.
And Apple IIe's, Apple IIc's.
Excellent. So, all right, tell me a little bit, just like it's a warm-up to get to Batteries Included. Tell me about your computer background before you were hired there.
There wasn't much of a computer background when I got hired there. It's like 20. I was 22 years old. So, not much, a lot had happened in the industry because I had my own pet and things like that. But I had been to computer class, through high school, I took computer courses and things like that. But there's a vast difference between punch card and what we ended up with at Batteries Included. That's one of the reasons why I decided to not continue my education in college, because they were still on punch card and I had an opportunity to get in the real world. And that's one of the reasons why I went right to batteries.
Nice. How'd you get hired, and what was your position when you got there?
When I got there, I was hired to put chips on a board for the dongles that were used for PaperClip. I don't remember, they would fit in the joystick port for the protection, and they were handmade. And there was a group of us that just did the soldering all day because they were small orders coming in at the time for the 64. Mm-hmm. And then we had burners for the EEPROMs that were going into the PETs. And later on, we took that technology, outsourced it, and we did dongles for the Atari PaperClip. So that's right. And then from there, if you want the boring stuff, I went from putting chips on a board to working in the store, which they also owned, and then finally up to QA, because I was the one that did all the demos for all the products down in the store.
Oh, cool. So Batteries Included, I know, is a Canadian company. There was a store associated with it?
Oh yeah, we had the store way before there was full software development. They started off selling Commodore PETs and Commodore software. Steve Douglas walked in around 1982 with the idea of PaperClip, and it took off from there. That they went into software development. But still managed the store. We're selling Commodore PETs, Commodore 64s, which worked perfectly because it was able to go right into the product. Like whenever they came in with a customer, we'd sell the customer the hardware and the software right then. That was ours. So it was a good fit at the time. Mm-hmm. But as we were moving into more and more development, the store was becoming less and less important. And other things were just... The start of the PCs coming into play around 83, 84 were kind of cutting into a lot of our sales. So that's when we decided to ditch the store and just go right into software development.
Kind of parallels the story of Analog Magazine, which was started off as a guy with a store that, and then the magazine running out of the back.
Well, there was a lot of companies that also had stores that were selling hardware and software that they were making. There was a company that was doing a Centronics parallel cable or something like that had a store in the States and then got into hardware fully on their own. So that's basically how we did things. It was a different time.
Yes.
Okay, we were like everybody was a pioneer. Nobody had a clue as to really what was going on. The only ones that were highly professional were those in the IBM world, and we never communicated with them too much.
So speaking of a different time, I'm pretty sure that back in the day, as a dirty pirate kid, I had a pirated copy of PaperClip that didn't require a dongle.
Well, they got rid of the dongles on the Apple. We didn't use that. People were breaking software all the time. And I still remember the worst type of protection was when they used to punch a hole in the floppy disk, the 5 1/4, and they used to just actually take the first track and sector and use a hole punch on those. And they used to break the heads off of the Commodore 1541 hard drives, floppy drives, because those machines, when you formatted them too much, would come out of alignment. So, yeah, I think they stopped that kind of protection too. We never went that route, but other companies did.
Okay, so you're building dongles by hand, and that's got to be a thrill a minute. And
I think I was lucky if they ever got more than 20 of mine that ever worked properly. I was horrible at soldering, but I was able to do some of the other stuff.
Nice. All right, so then you went into QA, you said?
I went from there into the store, and then in '84, around October, I went right into QA, and I was the first one to start that department because I could break the software better than anybody else could in that company. Because just through all the testing that I did, I'd always find the bugs anyways. Because whenever you demonstrated a piece of software, you'd always find something new. And I never demonstrated it the same way. I never went by a script or anything like that. So I was finding all kinds of problems.
All right. So let's talk about demoing in the store first. So you're down in the store.
In the store, we only had PaperClip on the 64 Commodore PETs. And we also had a product called the Consultant, which was our database product.
Okay.
And we moved the Consultant into the... we did it for the IBM, but we had also did it for... we took the parts of the Consultant and moved it into HomePak for the Atari. And also into the IBM HomePak and Mac. We just took little bits of it and streamed it down. So that's what happened with the Consultant. It wasn't a big product. It wasn't a big database product for the other computers, but it was pretty big on the Commodore 64 and Commodore PETs.
Okay. So, so you're demoing it, you're finding problems, and then...
then I moved up there and went to all the trade shows and things like that. To test the product, I was really working with some really, really amazing developers at that time. Not only Steve Douglas or Dieter Demmer, but as well as Dan Moore and Steve Ahlstrom. They were amazing to work with on the Atari. They knew that machine inside and out. And one of the great things, the development manager they hired was Michael Reichman. He was highly into Atari. And he did an amazing move where he brought in Martin Herzog, who was our marketing person. And he was very, very big on Atari. That's all he ever talked about. There was always these fights between who was a Commodore person, who was an Atari person. Fortunately, we never had anybody on the Apple side come in and start saying that theirs was better. But it was a pretty big challenge to get the guys, the president and the vice president of the company, to really look at other computers. That was a big challenge. And finally they said, okay, let's do it. And once that came about, they started to see things were a little bit better in some of the other computers out there other than just the Commodore PETs and 64s, that there were opportunities in all of them. So that's the life of the Atari. And the HomePak by Russ Wetmore was an amazing programmer himself, and the Atari version of HomePak was really, really tight and good. And back then you had to realize that every piece of code that anybody wrote could actually take up room for writing a page or something like that. So the code had to be really, really small, really tight, and work. because there wasn't a lot of room for mistakes. The magazines wouldn't let us do that.
Yeah.
So that's where the QA really came into play. And the guys in support would help me out. They were amazing people. Some of them were Atari evangelists. Howard Campbell was one, and he was able to help me take that product apart left, right, and center on a daily basis. We just fight through that thing and made sure that it was rock solid before it went out.
Can you think of any examples of problems or issues that you found that were important?
For HomePak, the hardest part was our terminal program, because there were so many variations of modems. Of course, there was the Hayes command set, some other ones, and getting people to understand the modem technology was the hardest part in the product that you can ever imagine. Okay, getting it to connect to bulletin boards, getting it to connect to CompuServe, like getting the two to talk to each other. Customers had a hard time with that. Mm-hmm. It's not like today, plug your modem in and go. Mm-hmm. Okay, you had to literally be more of a hands-on person, even in the consumer level, and they just weren't ready for that. And no matter how well we did our documentation, no matter what we did, people still had problems with it. Even my later days with WinFax at Delrina, modems are always an issue. Mm-hmm. And you just have to have a little bit more tech savvy you have to be more tech savvy than you are today. Yeah. So that's basically it. What else can I, All
right.
Do you want me to go with some of the other items that we had were databases, and they had a hard time dealing with it. People just weren't familiar with fields and records and all that kind of thing. Today it's Oracle is the standard, or some of the other ones, FileMaker. But back then, people just didn't have a good grasp of it.
Any stories about PaperClip?
The two on the Atari version and the Commodore 64 version were completely different. Even though we said, these are the commands we want, this is what we need, mm-hmm. Steve and Dan decided that they wanted to take the product in a different direction, because the Atari could do a little bit more with the function keys and some of the other things with split screen, mm-hmm. that the Commodore 64 would have trouble with. And it actually came out to be a really, really nice product, because you could actually do the split screens, you had headers and footers, there were just a lot of different things that PaperClip had for the 64 and just wasn't capable of doing. Mm-hmm. Even though we had our own hardware card for the Commodore 64 called the 80-column card to make a 40-column screen into an 80-column screen, it still wasn't the same as what we were doing on the Atari. And that was the part of the Atari that I really liked the most, is it seemed to have a little bit more flexibility. And even the Atari ST, when I worked on that, was an amazing machine. And that one should have been the leader in the field. And we had done Dega Elite, which was a paint program for the Atari ST. Mm-hmm. And to work on that product was the best fun I ever had. To be able to sit there and paint and get paid for it, sure, I'll do that.
Nice.
Yeah. And that Atari, as you know, was a 1 meg computer, and that was like high-end RAM that you just didn't see before.
Yeah.
Right? And a 3.5 floppy disk built into the keyboard was pretty cool. Yeah. So I don't know if you had a chance to work on it, or what your experience was with that one.
I only dabbled with STs, and I'm sure I played with Dega, but probably not too much, so I don't really have.
Okay, so you don't remember having to twist the keyboard to bring down because the RAM used to pop up? So you used to have to twist the keyboard whenever it got hot. RAM back down.
No, really?
Yeah. If you used it too many hours, the way I did, it used to pop up. So we used to twist the keyboard back, pop the RAM back down.
It's ridiculous.
That's what I remember about it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, that's where I said some of the hardware fun comes into watching some of these machines crash. The Commodore 64s had their power supplies. The nice thing about the Atari 800s and the other Ataris were they were rock solid. They never had a lot of returns from what I could tell. They just worked. And I was really impressed with their technology that they had put into it. The power supplies on the Commodore 64s, as you know, were weak and they would burn out. Yeah, the heads on the 1541 floppy drives, as I said, would come out of alignment. So there was a lot of things that just never happened on an Atari. So I never had the hardware issues that I had on the other machines.
Oh, that's good.
So it's easier. It actually made my testing easier because things weren't breaking down.
Right. If it's a problem, it was a software problem and not a hardware problem.
Oh, yeah, definitely a software problem. I never had to go out and find run over to the techs that were repairing the machines and say I need another power supply.
Right.
It just never happened.
So I was looking at Wikipedia here. I didn't realize that Batteries Included did hardware for other platforms because they didn't do hardware for Atari stuff. Do you have any sense of
We did
why?
we did the Arbiter system, which was a network configuration for the Commodore PETs. We did Centronics parallel cables for PETs to and Commodore 64s to the Epson printers and the management tele printers.
You did
So,
some IEEE interface cards and the
There was an
card.
IEEE for, the floppy drives for the Commodore PETs, and if you wanted to move the higher end floppy drives or hard drives, required an IEEE 488 interface. And that's what that bus card came into play, was so the Commodore 64 could run the other devices and not just the standard serial 1541. So it made it much easier, much faster at times. And especially at schools like that, because all their 2031 drives, all their 2040s and 4040 floppy drives would work with it.
So I realize this probably wasn't your job and not your decision, but do you have a sense of why Batteries Included didn't do any hardware for the Atari machines?
At that time, they were phasing out hardware. It's expensive. Hardware in any company, and I went through this even with our scanners at Del Arena, it gets really, really costly. The breakdown rates alone can kill you. But more importantly, as soon as somebody comes up with something new, your product's dead. And to have any inventory, as you know, in hardware is never a good thing. So that's why they didn't do it for anybody else. At one time, they were thinking of actually producing their own scanner at Batteries Included, but they shelved the idea because of cost.
Can you think of any other products that didn't come to be?
Well, yeah. We had an opportunity to do Mace Utilities for the IBM because we had developed ISGR portfolio for the IBM. We did Consultant for the IBM. We did HomePak for the IBM. And we're going to go head-to-head against Peter Norton at that time before Peter sold it to Symantec. And we were going to bring out our own Mace Utilities, and the president of the company, Michael Reichman, at that time said, nobody's ever going to buy any utilities. Nobody's ever going to care about this. And we could have been a really, really big player in that field. So that's the one product that I wish we had come out with, because it had almost the same utilities as Peter Norton. So that's the one we let go.
I see, and in the Atari realm, I see something called B-Graph Elite, which is a statistical analysis package that I know nothing about.
Michael brought that one in. Michael Reichman brought that one in around the same time we were looking at HomePak. So that would have been the middle of '85. And we looked at it, and I said, what are we going to do with this thing? And it never really went out anywhere. We put it in a box, and I think like one person actually knew anything about how this thing was supposed to work. I had no way of testing it. I didn't have any specific statistical programs that I could run against it to actually get it to flowchart. Not, if it was like the same way as it is today with, how can I say it, with Excel. and the charts that it could produce and everything else. If I had that kind of technology with this product, it would have been amazing. So yeah, bgraph never went anywhere. But that's, you're really testing my limits here. Because I forgot all about that one.
Good. Then I'm doing my job.
Yeah, you definitely are. You research well.
All right. Well, actually, I didn't research that well because I'm about out of questions. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
What happened to batteries included? I guess you know the history of it, that it was bought by Electronic Arts after we had to go through a little bit of bankruptcy, and then they took us over, and they didn't do anything with any of the products. They didn't carry on with Paperclip. They didn't carry on with the consultant. They just, I don't know what they wanted with the company, but nothing ever got carried on, and that was kind of a sad thing.
Did you stay on as employee, as an Electronic Arts employee?
I stayed on for about 2 months, and that was it. I had an opportunity to get into IT at another company, so I grabbed it. And then later on, Mark Skapinker and I and a bunch of other people from Batteries Included got together and went on to form Delrina. And that's a whole other thing that I could get into. That's a 10-year discussion.
Not in my purview because it's not Atari related.
No, that had nothing to do with Ataris.
Nice. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Bye.
If you enjoyed these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.